Welcome back to the next lesson, which is tips 11 to 20. So hopefully you've already learned a few useful techniques along the way, and let's look at some more. Okay. Now, first of all is adding and removing markers with inside of After Effects. So I've got a piece of music here, as you can see, from bensound.com. Really good website if you do want to get some free, royalty-free music. You know, don't have to pay as long as you credit them. Exactly what I'm doing here. Now, if you want to synchronize your animations to the music, you can actually add markers inside of After Effects. So on your keypad, on the sort of numbers area on the far right, you'll have a little asterisk, like a little star. If you hit that without a layer selected, it'll put a marker by here. You can see it, okay? And you can double click that and you can type in a comment. So it may not be that you're doing a synchronized animation. You may be passing this file on and you say, by here, start the effect or whatever, you know, and you can click OK. So when you pass the file on, it'll just come up with a little comment, by here, start the effect. Now, I'm not using it for that, so I'm not going to use the comments, so I'll just click OK. Now, what I'm going to be using it for is I'm going to be playing this through, okay? Now, I want to get rid of that, so if you hold Control while you're hovering over it, these little scissors come up, and if you just click, it'll delete it. Now, the music has got a tempo kind of like that. So I'm going to be playing it through because I want each word to kind of animate on as to the music, if you get me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the spacebar, play, and then every kind of beat, to the beat of the music, I'm going to hit the asterisk key, so then I know when to scale each word up. So let me show you what I mean. If I click play, right, okay. So what happened there is because this layer was selected, it made all the markers on the layer, and I want them on the composition, okay? So I'm going to redo that again. And what you also noticed, as I played through, the music sort of lagged because I was obviously, you know, making changes and it was kind of slowing down. So it can be a bit tricky. It may be that you just want to put a marker on by here on the actual composition, so make sure no layers are selected. Or let's say let's select a layer and hit the asterisk. So then you may want to say, okay, this is where I want to fade out. You know, it may be that you use it for that, but I'm using it for actual marking the tempo of the music, which can be hard when it lags. But let me just play it again. I'll let it play through once, and then I'll do it again from the start. Okay. So I've got two here, and I think I want to remove this one. So what I can now do is I could animate each individual layer, but I'm just going to offset it so they just appear, just to make it nice and quick. So I can come to each marker, and they're not that evenly spaced, so maybe it's not the best. Because I'm doing this on a laptop, that's why it's lagging. But if you were doing it on a decent computer, then you know it would be fine. So I can start moving each of these to start at a certain time. Okay, now again, that's one use for it, to kind of synchronize sound. Let's say you've got an explosion that kind of starts a bit late and you just want to mark where it is, so you know where you put your stock footage for the fire. That's another use. If you just want to mark a certain layer to say fade out by here where this marker is, that's another use. And this sort of sound synchronization thing is again another use if you're on a good computer. So I haven't got enough room to do them all. What I would normally do is, I think I do actually. Yeah, I've got one more marker. Okay, comes in very, very late. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to extend the composition by, let's say 5 seconds. So let's go 10 seconds composition. Right, so now I can zoom out and offset all of these. So shift click and extend them. So what's going to happen now when I play it through? I need this to be extended as well. There, I've got something which is kind of synchronized to the sound. First two are a little bit out of sync, but I can move that. It's done basically half of the work for me. Okay, so the next one, center anchor point. So what I've got here is I've got my rocket, and I've animated it scaling up. Now, let's say, actually, I want this to be scaling up from the middle. Well, if you get your anchor point tool by here, you can move, let's come to the end, you can move this to where you want it to scale from. So if you want it to scale from the top, it scales from the top. Okay, if you want it directly in the middle and you don't exactly know where the middle is, there's two things you can do. If you hold Control, it'll snap to the middle, or it'll snap to the top, or snaps to these sort of edges, okay? And you can snap it to the middle like that. But let's say you want to really, really quickly, it's up, your anchor point's up by here for whatever reason, and it's not scaling directly from the center. What you can do is go to your anchor point tool up here, hold Control, or Command on Mac, double click, excuse me, and it's now defaulted to the center. Okay, and if you want it to go exactly from the bottom, if when you're moving it you hold Control, you'll see it snaps. Okay, so then it'll go exactly from the bottom. There's no kind of trying to eye it up, oh, where is the bottom, where is the bottom. If you hold Control, it'll snap, or snap back to the center. So that's a really nice little quick technique, instead of trying to eye it up and you're maybe a little bit off then and stuff like that. Cool. So the next one is, we're back to this sort of footage with text, okay? And let's say you've got this footage and you've got the text animating, so the footage is revealed through the text. It's all very well and good, but let's say you want to replace this footage very, very quickly without deleting it. And then, because if we were to delete it, you'd have to reset this track mat to be coming through the text and redoing settings, and you don't want to do that. I've also got curves on here. So let's say we want that to be applied, but to this footage, background 2. All you need to do, with your background footage in your composition selected, click and drag, but while holding Alt or Option key on the Mac. So hold Alt, click and drag this footage down to this one, make sure it is selected as well, and you'll see it'll have the same effect on it, and it's got this track mat, and it's just replaced that. Okay, so any effects that were on the original piece of footage will now be on this footage, like this curves. Okay. And yeah, that's a very, very simple way. So again, what I did, let's come to about here so you can actually see the footage. So Control Z to undo it. Here it is. Right, so this is the footage. Make sure it's selected in the composition, and you Alt click and drag your new piece of footage directly on top, let go, and it changes it out. It's got the same effect on there, and the track mat and any other stuff you've got going on. So that's a really nice quick way. Otherwise you'd kind of have to, if you didn't do that, where are we? Replace footage. What would happen is you delete it, and then you'd have to drag in this footage and set the track mat, and then actually put whatever effects back on there, and it's just a pain. It's just a pain, so don't want to do that. Okay, next one is interpret footage. Now in the first lesson, I showed you, I went through the fact that if you import image sequences, then they default normally to come in at 30 frames per second, and I showed you in the preferences how to change that, because personally I would need it coming in at 25 frames per second, but I've got mine set to 30 just to show you. Okay, so I'm going to import an image sequence. If I go into here, let's go to desktop, Udemy tips and tricks, section 2, lesson 4. I've got an image sequence here of this footage. Okay, so if I just click the first one, make sure TIFF sequence, if you're ever importing a sequence of images, make sure TIFF sequence or JPEG sequence, whatever it is ticked. With the first one, just the first one selected, click import. So what it's going to do is imported all of this, and if you see up here, it's imported it at 30 frames per second, and maybe you don't want to work with that, I don't. What you can do is right click and go to interpret footage main, and then it's going to say, right, assume this frame rate 30, no, I don't want that. Assume this frame rate as 25, click OK, and now you'll see that number up there has changed to 25. So now this should match our background footage. This is an MP4 file. It's the same piece of footage, but this is just a video file, and this is as an image sequence. So when we click, it'll be on the exact same frame. Awesome. So that's interpreting the frame rate, how to change it. Let's say, just to show you, let's say we had this at 30. Click OK. You can see actually the clip's gotten shorter, so if we go here, turn it on and off, it's at a different point because it's playing this back 5 frames faster. Okay, so this piece of top footage is actually going 5 frames faster than this one down here, because the video file is 25. So, you know, if we come to the BG footage, it's actually 29.97, and then this one's getting interpreted differently at 30 frames per second. So it's just easier to right click, interpret footage, main 25. There we go. Now it matches up. Excellent. So moving on to the next one. This is a really quick one. Let's say I want to add new layers. Quite often people go layer, new, and then come down to solid. Now, if you want to add, you can see each one of them has actually got their own sort of keyboard shortcut. So if I want a new solid, all I need to do is Control Y, and then you can alter it in there, click OK. But if you can't memorize, all of these, because, if you want a null object, it's Control, Alt, Shift, Y, it'd be different on Mac. A very, very quick way, if you've got a bit of blank space in here, if you just right click and then go to new, and then they're all in here as well. So new shape layer, let's say new null object, a lot quicker than go in layer, new, and coming across. Okay, so you can memorize these, and you can also just right click new solid. Okay, click OK. So that's a very quick way of adding new layers. Okay, next we've got toggle path visibility. Now in here I've created the sky is just a solid with a gradient on it, the grass is just a solid which is green and scaled down, and then I've got this car built out of multiple kind of things in here. Now if I was animating this car, the one thing I don't like is seeing this blue line around the outside. It really gets on my nerves sometimes if I'm trying to work with it intricately. If that ever bothers you, you've got something here called toggle mask and shape path visibility. Click that and the shape path will be toggled on and off, and I much prefer working this way because it really does get on my nerves. Now if you've got a piece of footage which has got a mask on it, you've masked a piece of footage for whatever reason, and you don't like seeing, let's say, we want to mask it to the window, for example. I don't know why you would, but let's just put it into some context. So let's say you want a reflection, okay? So let's bring the transparency down and maybe toggle and screen it over. No, not screen. Yeah, let's overlay it like that, bring the opacity back up. So let's just say we've gone for a little reflection in there or whatever. I don't like seeing this outline, so you can turn it off for masks as well, and you can see it toggles that off. So if you're ever thinking, well, I've got a mask on here, but I can't actually see the outline of it, why? Well, this one by here, toggle mask and shape path visibility. There we go. Okay, right, next one, trim comp to work area. So I've got a piece of footage here, and let's say I've got, let's make some new layers. Let's make a load of null objects. So what is the default, what's the shortcut for null? Control Alt Shift Y. So Control Alt Shift Y. Let's just make loads of nulls. So let's say these are solid layers and text layers and everything, and this is my footage. Now my footage only goes up to 4 seconds. So let's say these ones do as well. We can trim them down to 4 seconds. Now if I were to want to render this, it'll render this black part at the end. So what we can do is, this is your work area, so you can drag this, so this is the only bit when you play it, this is the only bit it'll kind of preview, okay? So this is kind of like your work area. But then if we were to render, we just want it's easier just to trim this down. So with your work area defined, let's say for example, we only want to do 3 seconds of it, we only want to render the first 3 seconds. Drag it to the 3 second mark, right click this sort of, when your mouse is on this grey area by here, right click and trim composition to work area, and now it'll trim it to exactly 3 seconds long, and it'll trim the ends of all the layers as well. So now it's just a lot easier, you haven't got that blank space at the end, a lot easier to work with. Awesome. So next one is loop-in animation. Okay, so loop-in animation. Now what I've got here is just a shape layer, and I've animated the offset of this trim paths. So it starts at 0 and ends at 1, so it does a full rotation. Now, if I wanted this to carry on animating over and over again and loop it, what I need to do is come back to the offset which I've animated. I just hit U, Alt click, and you can type in a little expression, okay? So the one I'm going to type is loop, all lowercase, then a capital O, and then UT. So it says loop out, and the only capital is this capital O by here. What I'm going to do then is open bracket and end bracket, okay? And that's all I'm going to do. So what's going to happen now is if we play it, it loops until the end of the composition. It sees these keyframes and it carries on looping them. Okay, now that would be good. It's just a basic loading circle if I ever wanted to pretend there's like a video loading or something. Now, if I were to move these keyframes, what the loop out does, okay, is it only starts looping from the end, from when you see the keyframes, okay? So it'll do it till the end, but it'll only start where these keyframes start, okay? So it'll do nothing for here, and then it'll start looping the animation. So if we move them back to the beginning, so it starts at the beginning, it'll do it for the whole composition. Now let's say that's the loop out, okay? So it starts when it sees the keyframes and carries on till the end. Let's say you want it to start from the beginning but end halfway through. Well, that's a loop in, okay? So if we just delete the word out and capital I, lowercase n, loop in, so it loops from the beginning. So it loops, carries on looping round until it gets to the end of these keyframes, and then it stops. Okay, so loop in, loop out. Okay, so that's quite handy. You can use that in a lot of things. You can use it for anything that's keyframed, basically. So position, scale, rotation, anything. Okay, so move them to the beginning, and there you go. Nicely done. Okay, next one is the vignette. Now, let's say if I turn this on and off, we've got a nice little vignette on our footage here. It just means the edges are darkened, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So, very, very simple. We just need to right click, new solid, and I want a black solid, so let's just turn this to black, click OK, click OK. Right, so I've got a black solid on top. Well, that's not great. What we want to do is we want a circle mask on there. So if you, with this layer selected, let's rename it to vignette. Select it, click down into the ellipse tool, and what you want to do once you've got this ellipse tool, double click, okay, and it's put a mask on there. I've double clicked it, it's put a mask on there, an ellipse which fits the footage. Now what I want to do is go to subtract, so it does it on the outside, then come down into the mask options, feather the mask, okay, like so, maybe a bit more, and maybe mask expansion to move it in and out, like so, play around with that, and then I'm going to lower the opacity, maybe bring it back in a little bit, and lower the opacity. Okay, so like that, very, very simple. I've made it look a little bit more cinematic by adding this nice little vignette. You don't want to be too heavy with it, but that's really, really simple, quick way to add a nice vignette, okay? And you can see it does kind of add a sort of cinematic trailer look to it. Excellent. Now, final one is rendering with an alpha channel. So what I've got going on here is just a little animation, and it says subscribe, and then it kind of just animates out. It's what I may use for a YouTube channel, or what you could use for a YouTube channel. Just very, very simple animation. Moves in, and then sort of animates out. Now, by here, it says show channel and color management settings. Anything that you see in video on a screen is displayed through red, green, and blue channels, or also known as RGB. If I go to alpha, what it's showing me, wherever it's black, there's no data there, and wherever it's white, there's data there, okay? Now, if I were to just render this, however, in a normal render way, without an alpha channel, when I take it into Premiere, it'll have a black background. So what you want to do is you want to render it with an alpha channel, so it shows where basically it's only going to render pixels in this white area, and it's not going to render the pixels in the black area, okay? So the way I need to do that is we'll come out. So this is the composition we want to render. Let's go to composition, add to render queue, okay? Now, I want to go to, click on this blue word where it says lossless. I'm going to go with a QuickTime, and where it says channels, if you go RGB and alpha, there it is. You don't, normally it'll just be red, green and blue channels, but you want the extra alpha channel, okay? And click OK, and give that a render to, let's go less than 4, render with an alpha channel, okay, and I'll go render. So that'll be done in a couple seconds, and then I'll show you putting it on top of footage. Okay, so let's just make a new composition. Let's drag some footage in. There you go, these people, and I'll also import what I just rendered, which was render with an alpha channel. It will be high file size because I did it in animation codec, because H.264 and some other codecs don't support the alpha channel, so it does have will have a bigger file size than normal. But when we click and drag it on top, it now has its own alpha channel, so that's the only bit. See, it's rendered it without the black background, whereas if you were to do it with another codec or without going RGB and alpha, so let's just very quickly show you that again. Add to render queue. Yeah, if you didn't click RGB and alpha, then it would have brought in the black background as well. But with that, you're put in, where is it? By here. No, by here. You're just rendering in that area, okay? That area. So you don't have the black background, so that's good. Okay, well, I'm going to end it there. In the next lesson, I'll be showing you quick tip on exporting with Adobe Media Encoder instead of After Effects' render queue. So hope you picked up some stuff for this, and I shall see you in the next lesson.